First of all, ultraviolet radiation is a form of electromagnetic radiation with a wavelength from 100 nanometers to 400 nanometers. UV radiation is present in sunlight, constituting the 10% of all the sun's electromagnetic radiation output. Even if the ultraviolet radiation is reduced in the ozone layer, located in the atmosphere, more specifically in the stratosphere, some plastics are shown as good UV filters against ultraviolet radiation. UV can be divided in three different radiations: the UVA, the UVB, and the UVC. The ultraviolet A has a wavelength from 400 nanometers to 315 nanometers. The ultraviolet B has a wavelength from 315 nanometers to 280 nanometers, and the ultraviolet C has a wavelength from 280 nanometers to 100 nanometers. In the stratosphere, the ozone layer does not absorb the UVA, 0%. However, it absorbs most of the UVB, 50%, and all the UVC, 99.9%. The latter can be harmful for the humans, which highlights the importance of the ozone layer in our existence. The problem appears when the thickness of the ozone layer depletes and, therefore, the filtration power decreases.
So to solve the problem that my colleague just presented, we asked us the following question. It was how much UVB and UVA radiation can be filtered with certain plastics, and we will assess the most efficient plastic to solve this issue. But the limitation of this experiment of the use of the plastic for the filter of the UVB and UVA is that the plastic also blocks out light and will cause people to use more artificial light, which will contribute to pollution due to the augmentation of the CO2 emissions. So we are searching a plastic that filters UVB and UVA radiation, but won't block too much light. Also, we have to take into consideration the waste of the different kinds of plastic that we are using. PET plastic is one of the types of plastic that we used in our experiment, and there's about 380 million tons of plastic produced in 2015. So during this time of the year, this production could be even higher. And the other type of plastic is acetate plastic, which was 190 tons of waste of this type of plastic. So it's also a thing we have to take into consideration, as we would need to produce more of this plastic, and more of it could be released into our environment, and will also contribute to pollution. So we don't want that. But maybe it could also be a way to recycle this plastic. So we have these things and these topics to consider as positive things, maybe. So it has its downsides and its
UVB
positive
rays make us
sides.
tan, but they're also dangerous to our health. They affect us directly in the form of sunburn, irritation, and even cancer, and in an indirect way when they come in contact with nitrogen dioxide, which is a gas that's emitted by combustion engines. Tropospheric ozone can be created. This is a super toxic gas that can cause respiratory troubles to humans and animals. In order to determine which type of plastic is better at filtering UV radiation without absorbing too much visible light, we have designed an experiment. The experiment consists in placing UVA, UVB, and light probes before and after a sheet of plastic. We connect the probes that are before the plastic to a lab quest, and the ones that are after the plastic to another one, so we can see the data in real time. Each 10 seconds, we take a photograph of both lab quests to get the same data of the same time. We repeat this process 8 times, and then we analyze the data.
A variety of materials are needed for this experiment, such as 2 boxes and plastic to hold the probes in place. We have used 2 light probes, 2 UVA probes, and 2 UVB probes. To find out how these probes work and how to use them, there are some videos on the internet from the manufacturer. In addition, these probes are connected to 2 LabQuest 2 interfaces to collect the data. We have used 3 different types of plastics, 1 yellow, 1 blue, 1 green, and 1 transparent.
To make this experiment, we used 3 different types of probes, a light probe, a UVA probe, and a UVB probe. To know how to work with these different probes, we needed to watch different tutorials we found on YouTube, and then these probes were connected to a LabQuest so we could see the result of the different variables and see the results.
Here are the measurements of the, without the screen, yellow acetate is plastic. As you can see, the UVB is the lowest value of them all. Nonetheless, it's also low in comparison with its general trend is low, especially in comparison with UVA and the light. Concerns the measurements with the screen is to denote how it is reduced and the similar trend it has with being near 15%, or near 15. Similarly with the other values, while it changes a little bit more, it's certainly interesting to note how these have significantly reduced in comparison with the other, and also light, which has reduced it to low and lower than, it has reduced lower than the middle value.
So now we're going to analyze the yellow acetate percentage reaction. First of all, we have the light reduction percentage, which values are mostly among 63 to 65%. Next of all, we have the UVA reaction percentages, which values are equal 95%. And finally, we have the UVB reaction percentages. Every single value is 80%. So we can conclude that all these values are really accurate and evenly matched.
Now, after seeing the experiment data, we're going to summarize the experiment and give our final conclusions. The ozone layer is a part of the atmosphere that filters solar radiation. Nowadays, there is starting to be a hole in this layer, which lets in more UV radiation. This is the reason that we have to find an alternative, like the plastics we are measuring, to protect ourselves. So, if it filters too much light, then we would have to turn on the artificial lights inside, which will lead to more CO2 emissions and a bigger hole in the ozone layer, which will also lead to less light and more emissions, and like this in an endless cycle. More UV, the more we need to filter. The more we need to filter, the less natural light there is inside. The less natural light, the more artificial light. The more artificial light, the more CO2. And it's like this every time. It gets worse and worse. That is why we need to find plastic that is the most efficient in filtering, so that this doesn't keep getting worse forever.
So, finding an equilibrium of the best solution to these problems can help us and the planet. If we reduce the UV radiation inside our houses, we could avoid some diseases that we don't want to have, but also reduce the light that we consume indoors. If more sunlight enters our houses through the windows, we could switch off the lights and avoid that energy that is needed to keep us light is produced. So, for that we are saving economic resources, but also contributing to reduce the CO2 pollution in the air. These are the reasons why we are trying to find a plastic between the most used daily to help the planet, the environment, and improve our standard of living in a more sustainable way. The most effective would be the best, but which plastic is the most effective in doing this?
The main source of light during the day is the sun. At home, for example, the most common way for sunlight to come in is through the windows, and it illuminates the whole house sometimes. Yeah, if the light enters, then so the UV radiation does the same, which is dangerous to humans. But if we use a plastic for the windows, for example, it will keep radiation outdoors, so it will enter the less. The plastic that lets the most light in across is the white one, but it has some problems. It let too much ultraviolet radiation come in, so that's a problem. Then the blue one lets the less light in, but it lets a lot of ultraviolet radiation cross in. That's another problem. Then the green, it's very similar, but the levels are a little bit lower. And finally, the most effective plastic is this one, the yellow, that lets the light cross, and it doesn't let ultraviolet radiation come in.
So, finally, as we have seen, the yellow plastic, this one, is the most effective. I'm sure that you see it and you use it daily and you dispose it to the bin and the container, and it's very cheap in the materials you buy. Like in the covering of some plastic bottles is one of these uses. Imagine that this plastic that has no significant value was used in the windows of all houses, even in new old houses of the world. This is called the circular economy, and it consists in produce less in this plastic. In this case, less production of yellow plastic. Reduce it to give it another use. For example, with this plastic, use it in the windows, as I have seen. The last are recycling, and it's transforming this yellow plastic in raw material again for doing another time bottles or envelopes or whatever. So I'm sure that you will know sea plastics, and especially this yellow acetate, one with different types. You can help to have the best future. We can.